Welcome to Rooted and Rising, a soulful podcast hosted by Dr. Cheri and Ellice Boone. Join the conversation as Dr. Cheri and Ellice explore the transformative power of holistic healing from the inside out. Together, they guide listeners through the deep work of reconnecting with their roots, uncovering the unconscious wounds that shape us, and rising into the fullness of our higher selves. So please, welcome the hosts of Rooted and Rising, Dr. Cheri and Ellice Boone.
Hello, welcome. And there's my alarm, my grandfather clock. I hope you can hear it. It's a great wake-up call for us all to be ready and on time today. You'll continue to hear the 9 chimes, but it's beautiful. They don't exist that much anymore. That gets us right now on the same topic of remembering. And I have to ask you, what happens after a moment of remembering? What insight, what breakthroughs occur when we remember? Remembering love is what it's really all about. And when the nervous system can settle down for a moment and go into that space, real magic can happen. And ironically, possibly some turmoil. Your integration is not linear. It is like a puzzle. And I love to use the example of Kinzuki. If we have a broken bowl and all pieces, every piece matters. So we can settle, so we can put the pieces together and figure out how we want to mold it together in our golden magic. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What is this?
Yes, welcome back to Rooted and Rising. I'm Ellice Boone, and Dr. Cheri just asked us a question about basically what happens after the insights come. And I think this is something that's common today, that many people have these big epiphanies and insights and spiritual clarity. And then after that, it's kind of like, well, what now? How do we get back to life, and how do we integrate this into our lives? So today on the podcast, we're kind of discussing that, what happens after the remembering, what happens after the spiritual insights. How do we work those insights into our life in a way that feels doable, sustainable? How do we continue to heal after the insights come? Because I think a lot of times we can feel almost like we came home, like we've reached a place that is maybe this precipice of where we want to be, and then we can almost come crashing down from that after the insights have settled and we kind of get back into the real world. So this is kind of about tools and ways to soften, slow down, and pause, so that we can stay in that place or continue the healing after those insights have, been revealed to us and that remembering is done. So we're going to go through that and just talk about what integration is, not integration as something that's performative, because I feel like that can be, we can get, oh, let me check things off my list. Oh, I've done my journaling, I've done my meditation, so I'm integrating. But integration as in, what does the relationship look like with yourself? And how are you approaching your life and your relationships with other people? So we'll talk more about that today. Dr. Cheri, I was going to jump into my practice. Did you have anything to add in this moment?
No, maybe just to reinforce what you said, that the remembering is the eternal part, internal. It's the quiet, it's the sacred, and then the integration, is how we live the external. It's the relational. It's the courageous, and like you say, journaling is and all the tools, all these rituals we do, that's exactly what they are. They are tools to lead us into remembering, reflecting, and then knowing how to show up relationally, because we are relational beings, and interact with our world in the way we feel whole, happy, and joyous. That's all I'd say.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Well, one way that we can do this, it can be to just take a pause and check in with our breathing. And so we love to lead you all in a short breath work meditation. I wouldn't say necessarily breath work, actually, but more of just a pause and a meditation to check in with yourselves. So, as always, if you can find a comfortable space where you can be alone without interruption, and if you're sitting down, just kind of, and you feel in a place that is safe, just go ahead and close the eyes for this. And what you want to start with always here is just tuning into the breath. So tuning into the natural rhythm. What does your breath feel like in this moment? Just noticing that without judgment or the need to fix or change anything, allowing the breath to go in and out in that natural rhythm. And noticing here any sensations in the body, noticing if the mind wants to wander off, if things are grabbing its attention, just bring it back to the breath. Maybe saying to yourself with each breath you take, I am aware of my inhale, I am aware of my exhale. And with that awareness resting on the breath, I invite you to deepen your next inhale slowly through the nose, and even slower exhale through the mouth. And on your next deep inhale through the nose and your slow exhale through the mouth, let out a sigh. And again, but this time really allowing that sigh to be audible, deep through the nose and out through the mouth. Really letting your body sink into the space that you're in. And noticing what it feels like to be still in this moment. Allowing any parts of your body that might be holding on, constricting, just invite those places to soften a little bit more. And as you sit here, allowing your breath to flow in and out, I want to invite you to bring to mind a moment where you had clarity. Maybe it was something big, a spiritual awakening, an epiphany, an insight, maybe something small that you were just thinking of recently. But bring that to your mind in this moment. Now, we don't need to go into story about the content of this insight, but just feel the essence of it. Or maybe distill it down to a word or two. And notice if you can, if this insight or this word is sort of held or stored in a place in the body. Taking a moment here to just scan and notice where this place might be. And it's okay if nothing comes up in the body, just holding the essence and the feeling of this insight within your body. And if it feels good to put your hand, if you feel a sensation or want to bring some warmth to that place in your body, you're holding this insight. And now ask yourself the question, what is one way that I can embody or bring this insight into my life today? One small way. Allowing yourself space here. And next, taking a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And another deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Taking just a moment to thank yourself for pausing here and checking in. And if it feels good for you and your eyes are still closed, just fluttering them open, maybe with a soft gaze on the room around you. And I encourage you to take as much time as you need here. Pause this podcast, soak it in, check in with yourself, or even take a moment to journal. Just a couple of thoughts that came to you as you sat here with yourself. It's interesting. I heard this phrase and I thought it was really beautiful that insight opens the door, but integration teaches us how to walk through it. So there's an action that's needed, but sometimes that action is all in a pause, a moment of stillness, a moment of just checking in with ourselves. So hopefully you had just a moment to do that. Thanks for joining us in that little practice.
And thank you, Elise. That was beautiful. And as always, I feel so rooted now and excited to dive in to understand a little more. Even I think as we do these podcasts, I realize when I walk away how many insights I receive. I think just talking about what I already know or what we already know, and we share as we share, new knowledge shows up, and it's just so fun for me. And I just hope that everyone reflects afterwards and see in their own life situation um, what a pause can offer. And that was a beautiful pause. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that we have a few things to talk about. We have a break coming up soon, but what we're going to go into is this piece around when people have these breakthroughs and when they come back from maybe a spiritual awakening or they do a medicine journey, what happens after that? They go back into their lives and they sometimes can feel more dysregulated. Cheri, have you noticed this in your practice in talking to your clients that this can be a common thing, that they have a breakthrough and afterwards it's like the clarity is lost and they feel disoriented almost?
Yes, I get that. I do see it in clients and I see it in myself. And as
Mm,
I shared, a little while ago, healing's not linear. Um, it's non-linear. And I think that when we get new insight, what we're doing is we're tapping into that stuck energy that trauma creates,
mm,
unresolved losses create. And so when we tap in that stuck energy, an energy can be released. And that is agitation, irritation, tears, even somatic symptoms. And so for me, that, it can be, I just experienced this week. So after the break, I'd love to share a little story where I had the somatic experience of my neck, my throat tightening up. And
mm,
as I shared a memory and wasn't expecting it to be anything, um, kind of a benign exercise, and it was another layer of unfolding for me. And so I think that is this is I want people to understand this is a common occurrence, and we'll kind of walk through that personal experiences so you can understand how it evolves. And
mhm.
so I like that I could get more in depth with that. But I do see
Okay.
that we have a commercial break. So we want
Yes.
to welcome our sponsors, and we'll see you back here at Rooted and Rising in a minute.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Hi, welcome back to Rooted and Rising. I'm Elise Boone, and I'm here with Dr. Cheri. And we're talking today about after we have a breakthrough, an insight, a remembering what happens. And we mentioned right before the break that sometimes people can come out of these experiences feeling like more dysregulated, more disoriented. And Cheri, you mentioned that you had a personal experience with some somatic feelings. Can you share a little bit more about that with us?
Yes, it's there's a moment when healing, we it's where we remember what we've always known, and then then the brave part is doing the work from this insight. And so um, this experience that I want to share is a pretty benign experience, and I want us to understand that benign experiences can be part of the healing process. It doesn't have to be these tragic traumas that define us. We are defined by patterns in our life and how we attach things. And so I was actually instructing an EMDR class, and part of that instruction is hands-on, learning. And so I was the client for the clinician, and I picked a pretty benign, you know, thing to work through. And the memory that just spontaneously came to me that I haven't thought about and wasn't premeditated. So I know it was kind of I was set up with doing the EMDR and teaching all day of unearthing something I always already remembered. And I was 5 years old, and my mom was making a bed, and I was home with her, and I was asking why, why, pretty much what 5-year-old's curiosity is. And she finally said, in exasperation, why do I keep asking all these why questions? And pretty much like, don't do that. And I remember feeling heartbroken and confused. And then as we were doing the EMDR, as soon as that memory, I shared that memory, my throat constricted. And the impression I received was, I'm not to speak. I'm not to bother her, and therefore bother anybody. And and I was this deep sadness. And so that was really fascinating for me, into recognizing this remembering did activate me. I felt the sadness, the heart like broken. I felt physically, and I felt my throat constriction, and then realize, okay, this is part of a train of things, and that we may remember. And I just don't want to dismiss these things. And as we continue the EMDR exercise, the throat started opening up. I started relaxing my shoulders. My heart opened up. And then thoughts, probably because this is a benign thing and maybe connected to many things I worked on throughout the years, I felt great compassion for my fatigued mother.
Mm.
She was fatigued. And so I was trying to remember, it was right when my sister was born, who was born premature, who had born with cerebral palsy, product of germ measles, I partially deaf. I mean, this is fragile, and house chores, and an active 5-year-old, very curious. And just wanted to not get the whole picture. And my adult can see that. But I was kind of surprised by how the compassion just came into my body. And
Mm.
it felt like, all this is okay. It just
Mm.
normalized everything for me. It was okay. I was a curious 5-year-old. It was okay. Mom was exasperated and tired. And it is annoying when why questions are at us. And sometimes we just aren't at our best to manage things. There was no intent for heartbrokenness, and no intent for me to be perceived as a bother. And so so I just was like amazed at how fast I could process through all that. And knowing that is a layer, is a layer attached to other experiences. And now I have to create the courage to continue being curious about what's another layer. So my throat can freely expand, because now I'm more aware of it. And I have been aware of some constrictions in my throat and not knowing what that's all about. And now I feel like I'm gaining a little more insight to that. It's more than me not being able to sing a song without my voice cracking or coughing. It's more about me not just talking fast. There's more attached to it. And so I'm kind of fascinated now and curious. That was an example I wanted to share with the audience.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Cheri. That was really so beautiful and so relatable. One thing that really stood out to me is how this was something that seemed like a benign practice to you. Oh, I'm going to take this simple moment. But really, what you discovered was profound, and it was also subtle. And I want to point out that if we're not paying attention, we can miss those pieces that are truly gems. And like you said, another layer of our healing. So, because you had done work with this in the past, around opening up your throat and being able to speak. In fact, this podcast is part of the reason why we're here, is like you opening up your voice and saying, I'm going to do this because I am going to use my voice and share what I have with the world. And so what a beautiful way to see that all come together, and to see you continuing to like open your voice and open your heart. And also beautiful to see how the compassion just flooded through into the body. I think because you were in a place where you felt, you knew already your mom wasn't doing that to harm you, but you understood where she was at. And so these sort of like memories come up when we're ready to feel and process through them from our true self. And our true self is in a more loving place that can say, oh, but it's okay. Your mom didn't mean to do that. And we see how that hurt you. You can tell that little girl, like, oh, yeah, you felt quieted and you felt it wasn't okay to share or ask questions and be curious. And that makes sense. And your mom didn't mean to shush you or tell you not to use your voice. So it's just a beautiful, like you said, you went through it so quickly because you were paying attention and you've done this work, and you were able to just really process through that. It's such a beautiful example. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. And thanks for listening and allowing me to share. And yes, I did a lot of work on this, so it went quickly. But I think the understanding is, some experiences are just that quick, and
Mm.
so this isn't laborious work. It's awareness. It's being present, and some are a journey. and a very deep, night of the soul journeys that do take are a little more laborious, so we feel, or fear, and that's beautiful too. So I just don't want anything dismissed, and just kind of celebrate any insight, because as we have these breakthroughs, I call it like break free, moments, then we have the opportunity to renegotiate, create new negotiations with ourselves in how we want to show up and present. And for me, in this incident, being flooded with that compassion was, I feel like that was like an exclamation mark for me in my world. Is like, it felt, the compassion offered such freedom for me. And it's also a wake up call. Is like, okay, Cheri, hone in on your compassion.
Mm.
Can you be more compassionate in all interactions? And can you be more overtly compassionate? And so that's just one message I personally took away, that someone else may take a different message away. There's no right or wrong message. And we all are so individual that we need to like respect that and celebrate what comes up. And because life's a journey, and we can use our, we can use our childlike curiosity, and like I think about, skipping through life, hip hopping, skipping, or we can just trudge through the quicksand of drudgery, and feel like the same old because we are still stuck in the past or hoping for the future and lost our presence.
Mm. Yeah, so true. I think kind of going back to where we started this conversation was how some people can feel sort of dysregulated and disoriented after an experience. Um, it's neat to know that there are little ways that these insights can come through, that not everything has to be this big experience. And
Right.
also, I want to go back to that question because there is a why do we feel sort of dysregulated? And I know you had mentioned in our previous conversation something about, our body sort of not catching up. Like we may have the insight in our brain, but our body is almost having a hard time. And I think I've experienced that in some of my own work where my body is still kind of stuck in this trauma response. Maybe it doesn't feel safe yet or it's so patterned and ingrained in me to respond a certain way. Yeah, so I'm just curious what your insight is on that piece, like when our body hasn't caught up yet with the insights that have happened, and how do we navigate that?
I think you said it very well. First, it goes back to the body keeps the score. I do
Mm.
feel like our bodies are record keepers, and we can just honor that, and that our mechanism, our self preservation, is set up to protect us.
Mhm.
And so there is a wisdom within. I think that's where I go to the inner healer intelligence, um, that understands how we need to process information and what our capacity to take on healing.
Mhm.
Because if the trauma may cause us to go to that survival mechanism of even inside catatonic, freeze, we may have fled, and like too much memory will cause us to flood. Is, we
Mhm.
just, and we have, and those survival mechanisms kick in, and we do flee, we do fight, and that may not be in our highest and best interest in the moment, and it's not healing, it's re-traumatizing.
Mhm.
And so our mind, body, and spirit understand that. And so the nervous system, is holds into all this stuff. And I think talking about the nervous system is really important, in um, respecting, the wisdom of it, and whether, and so we don't want to overactivate it or unactivate it. And so that's where I think we can begin after our commercial break. Talk about a little dive into the nervous system and why we say the body keeps the score, and then how to navigate that.
Mhm.
So let's take a moment for our sponsor, and we'll be right back.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly and almost miraculously with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Hi, welcome back to Rooted and Rising. So before our break, Dr. Cheri, you were telling us a little bit about the nervous system. Can you expand on that more, how the nervous system sort of responds in these situations, sometimes not favorably? So we maybe need a little bit more time for our body to catch up with the insights our brain has discovered. Are there any tips you have to navigating that, or any more explanation around the nervous system work?
Yes, I think the nervous system, is again very wise, and its whole purpose is to protect us. So when we're in danger, it acts up. We get alarm bells go off. The fear, all these emotions that it incites is to get our attention. I feel like our master teachers sometimes are feelings of anxiety or depression. They're not just states of being. They're letting us know we're out of sort. And so we will, a lot of times our rational mind will override that, and good, strong coping skills or maladaptive coping skills will try to override that, because we think we know better, and also we're not present, so we're running from the past or trying to run towards the future, and so the body's always present, and sometimes when we tap into a memory, wherever dance we're doing in our rational mind, it may play a part into how our body reacts to stop us from hitting a wall, to stop us, to get our attention, really. And it may be, the nervous system may be asking us questions like, is this safe to keep? Is this sustainable? And can I still belong in my life if I know this truth? Because a lot of times we recreate our lives, right? And so the body wants us to be safe, and so it takes in consideration our whole mind, body, spirit of our surroundings, our relational building, our support system. Can we get the consistency that we can maintain if we do this change? Are we ready for that consistency in our change? Because, which I've said before, where much is given, much is required. We may get some insight, but not be ready yet. I could have had my own experience with my mom, and I can't say this is wrong either, and been in a place where I'm not ready to be compassionate towards her. I feel pretty resentful.
Mhm.
She should she should have known better. And did I show sadness? Did I show rejection? So I'm important too, just as much as my siblings. I could have, and that would that have been wrong? Maybe not necessarily. Would it take me right now in my life, the place I want to be? No. And I think that's how come the compassion flooded in. I didn't make a choice. I feel like I didn't make a choice, but I did make a choice. This is what me make the choice, because there must have been some layering preparing me for this,
Mhm.
and probably is necessary in the stages in other relationships of my life that I'm going to have a wake up call, like a hit on the head of they need my compassion.
Mm.
And versus maybe I have, some hard feelings. And so can I see other relationships from a different perspective that can serve me better and humanity better, my relationship better? And so that's some of the examples I would
Mm.
say.
Yeah, that's so great. Thank you. It's funny, as you were talking, I felt like you were speaking directly to me because as we had sort of mentioned last week, and this is slightly different than having a big epiphany, but I shared on last week's podcast about going through some repressed memories of sexual trauma. And
Yeah.
it's been very interesting watching my body responses throughout my day in moments when I feel everything is fine mentally. I think, oh, I'm good, everything's good. I've also feel, oh, I've done the work. I've seen the coach and I've gotten my anger out and I've expressed myself and I've moved this energy through my body. And yet here I am in a very ordinary place and my body is having a response, whether that's a wave of anxiety or a flood of emotion. And it feels a little out of my control. And my husband so kindly pointed out to me how I've been so intensely busy, and it was out of I'm always busying myself with things, but it was out of character. It was that feeling of me busying my mind, busying my body to run away from these feelings and this stuff that was coming up. And so I think it's interesting how our minds and our bodies often can be disconnected. And when that's the case, it's not very pleasant. So I'm having these body sensations, like you said, my nervous system is responding and kind of getting my attention. And I'm trying to ignore it and sort of repress it and suppress it. And yet it's like, nope, here's this emotion, here's this feeling. I need to work through this. So if I were to continue busying myself and ignoring these feelings, I think it would come out in a way, express itself more, cause dis-ease in the body, whatever that is, as it compounds. Thankfully, at some point, I just paused and said, okay, what do I need to hear? Like, what do I need to feel in this moment? And just took a second and I was able to let some tears out. That was a release. And it's so interesting because it may not be related to a very particular content. It may not be in a moment that I think makes sense, but it's happening. And if I don't take a moment to pause and allow that to happen, to give myself a little bit of love and tenderness, then those moments pass me by, but they also continue building. So I think this relates to people also having gone through big spiritual awakenings and feelings that we can have this sort of like dysregulation from our mind and our body. And what we need to do is check in and understand what's happening and how we can come to a place that feels safe and grounded, so we can allow those epiphanies to continue and the insights to keep flowing, and the love to be present and the safety to be there. So I hope that makes sense. But it just felt very personal in that moment.
I really appreciate that. I think that is really beautiful. And a couple of things. It reminds us that we we behave, our body as well as our mind, as our spirit behaves in what we know, to this point. And these experiences can be little golden nuggets of new wisdom.
Mm.
And like you could feel like and interpret that as a setback. I worked through all this, like you said, and so why is this coming up? And it's biology. It's not failure.
Mm.
And we are human beings. And so having these experiences sometimes just remind us that we are human beings and our body is such a sacred vessel in assuring that we work things through. If we didn't have our body, we wouldn't feel these things, wouldn't have these experiences. And therefore maybe our learning would be hindered. Just something curious to think about in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to how subtle things can be, I told my
Yeah.
husband it'd be easy for me to ignore this feeling, the butterflies in my stomach, that feeling of overwhelm. It's easy to ignore. And so bringing awareness to it is really important. And then whatever steps and tools you have from that point can be used. But if you don't have awareness and if you keep pushing it down or aside or just not noticing it, then you don't have the opportunity for new wisdom, or in my case, for that emotion and that weight to sort of move through my body and out. I won't be able to process it.
And what I really love about your story that I think is important about this is how this opportunity, your openness with this opportunity with your husband, for instance, allows other, new wisdom outside of you to be experienced, where you by you being open and him stepping in and being able to share his feedback and his observations, his insight, as well, allows you to address more layers and also build emotional intimacy
Mhm.
that is gets that maybe matures with the maturity that you're experiencing in releasing this baggage, releasing not carrying the shame that was projected onto you.
Mhm.
I don't have to carry the other person's shame. It's not mine. I can be free, and my body can be completely free, and to love more. And he gets to grow with you in that loving and meet you where you're at, and therefore you're at where he's at, and the trauma becomes less and less, if not completely dissipated over time.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah,
would be
that brings to mind too that how important it is in integration that we're addressing our relationships,
exact.
because it can often feel not only like you're dysregulated, but like all of a sudden you have these new insights, new way of thinking, your paradigm has been shifted. But what about the people that you're in constant relationship community with? If those people are the same way that you used to be, and you feel like you've had this shift, then you don't know where you fit or how you belong in that community, in that relationship. And so it's really important. And I've had these experiences in the past with my husband where it's like, oh, we're just not making sense because the way that we used to function, the way we used to communicate, the way our perspectives were has shifted for me. And that creates a distance, or it can create a distance. So, yeah, I don't know if you have anything to speak to on that, like how we navigate relationships after we feel these big shifts in our lives. Is there any tips
Well, just
there?
exactly what your story says it all, really. It doesn't take big things, it takes openness and vulnerability. Because they say, I heard one of the greatest strengths we have in our relationships is how the degree of vulnerability we're willing to have. And
Mm,
there are some times where, our as we grow, our closest ones don't want to grow with us. They
mhm,
want to stay in the trauma, and that's a different kind of challenge, and it can add another layer that we have to kind of grow through. And so, I was watching a show, and it was I think well written about this episode of, an alcoholic recognizing, I either die or I stop drinking. And
mm,
his partner was very, met him when he was alcoholic. She was a functional alcoholic, and he, as he his choice to go get change his life, she couldn't meet him there, even though it was going to save his life. She couldn't give up her vision of him being in his drinking states, and her desire to stay with that, and not his healthy. So there, that was a shift, that created a fraction in a relationship.
mhm,
And if and so there those stories happen, and we have to, like, this is where we stay in the present and really, like, own what kind of healing we really want to do. And
mhm,
if it's done with, we tap into our loving energy, we'll find that wisdom,
mhm,
and because, trauma lives in procedural patterns.
mhm,
It's reflexes and expectations, and about how it should be in our relationships in our work life, versus be present in curiosity and observe what's happening and what needs to be, what's getting broken and what's getting repaired, and then what choices do we make in that, because the power of choice is really big. It is, this is the biggest freedom we have, is our ability to choose. And so much of our healing is what we choose.
mhm. I think we have one more commercial break, but right after that, I have some things to share as well.
Okay, great. See you in a moment.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
Welcome back to Rooted and Rising. With me, myself, Dr. Cheri, and with my co-host Ellice Boone. We were talking before the commercial how insight is one step. It can be intrapsychic, but healing is emotional, and that we can remember love and still be dysregulated in our intimate relationships and in just an intimacy expression overall, and can feel alone with that and then activated with others. And so that is not so uncommon in dealing with trauma. And so your story, Ellice, fascinates me because it's just a beautiful example of how to lean into our relationships as and recognizing that is where the magic of healing can happen. And so I'd love for you to share a little more if you have more to share.
Yeah, I was thinking before the break, just again in this last week, how I'm a living, breathing example of all of that we're speaking of today. And another piece with my husband was I was busying myself and he was feeling my energy and he felt a distance between us. And in our talking, he sort of called that distance out in that space and just, it was almost like he could feel the incongruency that I was busy, busy, busy over here, but he could almost feel that I was like hiding something. And what I was hiding were these emotions and these feelings that were coming up that I didn't want to really face or allow to come through, or I was just sort of pushing to the side. And when he brought that up, it gave me the opportunity to share what my real experience was. Also opened the floodgates for more tears, which felt like a good healing moment. Um, but what's so interesting is that I could have just continued on and I could have just avoided the vulnerability of saying, actually, I'm feeling like overwhelmed standing in a grocery store, or I'm hanging out with our daughter and this wave of anxiety feels like it's coming over me for no reason. If I didn't say those things to him, he wouldn't have been able to have compassion for what my experience was, to understand that I wasn't just being busy and short because I was being that way. I was being that way to avoid something going on within me, which makes it not personal towards him and helps him to have more love towards me. So it's just this beautiful cycle that can happen with the more open communication, the more vulnerability. And I will say we're very open with each other. It wasn't that I was hiding it from him, I was hiding it from myself. So really in that moment, what he was doing was giving me the chance to understand what I was hiding from myself. And in speaking to it, it let it come out and it let him understand me more. And that brought us closer. But I just see this happening in so many different relationships with clients, friends, this sort of busying of ourselves or this putting off of what is really happening, and how that is damaging on so many levels relationally, and how coming together and communicating, even when it feels stupid or small, allows for more opportunity to deepen in your understanding and your love for each other. So, just encouraging that to listeners out there to continue being vulnerable, showing up, and allowing that deepening. It may not always work, it may not go perfectly, but it's definitely better than the alternative, which is continuing to hide those feelings, to hide that piece of yourself, so that your partner doesn't get to love all of you. So it gives them the opportunity to love all, the good and the bad, and I think it can be a really beautiful thing. So, yeah.
Thank you, Elise. That's beautiful. And like you said, it's we may not even do this on purpose. You're busying yourself and you weren't even aware. But what you're open to is hearing the reflection back, how you showed up, and versus you defensiveness, and maybe there's a little defensiveness at first, but because we're human, but being able to work that through so that we can gain that insight. And this is where we start at the beginning of the show of the value of taking a pause,
Mhm.
and be curious for insight. One time I read, how important it is to be impeccably honest. And impeccable honesty is when we take the pause, reflect about ourselves, our own, how we say a sentence, how we address someone. Are we being manipulative? Are we being self-serving? We're always manipulative and self-serving overall because that's self-preservation. But when we step back, like, what was my real agenda? Was I trying to get close to them, or was I trying to say I'm close and creating distance? Am I playing a
Mhm.
game with myself? So it's almost having
Mhm.
to talk, how honest am I with myself? And
Mhm.
so the pause allows us to do that, have this personal vulnerability and intimate relationship with ourselves. That
Mhm.
that is where the healing can happen. And it can be, that alone can be so dysregulating at first. And then a
Mhm.
wave of peace, love, because we tap into our love. And that
Mhm.
is where the healing really happens.
Oh, so true. Okay, well, we're already at the end of the show, and I just want to say to our listeners out there, there are so many layers to integration, but just taking my own experience, what has been so wonderful for me are just like those quiet choices where I'm choosing, like you mentioned, honesty. I'm choosing rest. I'm choosing to slow down and pause instead of pushing forward or busying myself. And those choices end in little pieces of me becoming integrated, and those parts of me integrating. So, your couple of journal prompts for this week, you can write, what helps me stay with myself when things feel uncomfortable or uncertain? Where am I being invited to move more gently right now? And what is one small, ordinary way that integration is already showing up in my life? So I hope you enjoy those journal prompts. And until next time, stay rooted.
And keep rising. See you then. Check us out. Rooted and Rising.
This has been Rooted and Rising with hosts Dr. Cheri and Ellice Boone. Through honest conversation, clinical insight, and creative reflection, Dr. Cheri and Ellice will empower you to reclaim your voice, your vitality, and your vision. This podcast is not about quick fixes. It's a return to deep knowing, gentle unraveling, and lifelong integration. Tune in each week, Wednesdays, 12 noon Eastern.